Hello, welcome back to episode 17 of Living in Infinity. We've conjured up another couple of good questions to dive into for today's episode. So it's going to be exciting. Alec, which one you want to start with?
Let's see. Yeah, let's just start with this one here. So I'll ask you first. You're tired. How do you know when to push or when to rest?
Hmm. I don't. I, I for the longest time, um, always erred on the side of rest, or that was my kind of natural tendency. Because I think and I mean, I'm kind of talking about this in the reference of like working out or like running or whatever, but I think I'm kind of in things for the long game. Like my goals are goals you got to slowly build up to. And it's more about just getting like tiny puzzle pieces in place over the long run rather than just doing like big efforts at once. So yeah, typically a bit on the side of resting, but I think I went too far into that. Like at any sign of fatigue or kind of like muscle soreness or whatever, I would back off a lot, and so it was just hard to make any progress. Um, and so, and now I've kind of like I read this book that explained that the body is like anti-fragile. So you break it down, it comes back stronger, and so I kind of mulled on that for a little bit, and now I'm to a point where I'm almost gonna keep pushing, always gonna push until I do break, just because odds are you're gonna bounce back from the pain, or you're gonna push through, and like maybe like endorphins, I guess, will kick in, and you'll feel fine anyway. If that makes sense, like I think we are meant to push,
Mhm.
and so yeah, I'm kind of leaning in that direction more now, and we'll see where it goes. I'm not gonna be like irresponsible about it, and I feel like my training is now in a good place where it's a good balance of stuff. Uh, but yeah, I'm definitely gonna keep pushing now.
Hmm. I think in the context of like endurance training, which seems like what you're primarily talking about, that's probably an area where it's better to push than to rest. Unless you're like a couple weeks out from a race or something, then at that point it makes sense to like be smart, like
Yeah,
taper off or whatever. But endurance specifically, I think that's one of the areas that it's better to just push because your body will adapt to that.
mhm.
Um, but
Especially
like
if it's at
for go ahead.
I feel like especially if it's at a low heart rate. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, I feel like your body can take almost an unending amount of getting beat up
Yeah.
if your heart rate's only like 130, 40. You know?
Yeah. 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 For sure. Like you can't just push full on sprints first. Like at some point you're gonna pass out. Like that's
Yeah.
not something you'd want to. Uh, but I think in the context of like lifting, which I primarily do, I don't do as much endurance training anymore. That's more of an area where rest is essential. Like you literally won't make progress if you're just like, I'm going to lift 3 hours a day, every single day, just like force my body to adapt. Like, no, you're going to tear something. You're not going to make any progress in terms of like strength or putting on muscle. Um, and so that's more of an area where like you have to learn to, at least from my experience, you have to learn to like figure out like learn your body and like really know how to listen to your body and know when, okay, I need a rest day today, or like I'm gonna taper off for like a week and then go hard again next week. Because ideally you should be making like week over week progress in terms of like adding weight or adding additional reps to whatever weight you're already doing. And if it's been like a couple of weeks and you're still stagnated, then something is wrong. Like you're either overtraining or your recovery's not there. Um, and so that's something I try to be super mindful about. But I do think when like endurance training, it's better to just, assuming you're not hurting yourself, it's better to just like push the limits and force your body to to adapt to, whatever distance you're trying to do.
Yeah. There was a there was a weird thing that happened on my run today. So I was like 30 miles in and just feeling not great. Joints were hurting, muscles were a little weak. Like I was running fine, but things it just wasn't great. Um, so it's kind of this decision point where it's like, okay, do I just baby the rest of this run, get the miles in, but like, you know, and that and slow running is productive from a cardio standpoint, but like I was already in that kind of slow sweet spot, and I faced this decision where like I either go slower, or I just kind of buck up and like push the pace. And I went that route, and what happened was like my muscles just like rose to the task, and like
Hmm.
they found their strength, and then that fourth mile was like solid. So that's just a weird. It's like counterintuitive, and but it's just a trick I've learned over time because like Um, 3 years ago, I probably would have just been like scared to push and been like, "Oh, okay, well, I'll
Yeah.
back off."
Yeah.
But
And David Goggins' book, his first one, which I don't remember the name of right now. I think I might have it. Uh, yeah. So his first one was Can't Hurt Me. Um, and take this with a grain of salt because it is David Goggins, but he always says, whenever you feel tired and you feel like you should stop, you're only 40% done. Like you can go another 60% without, like you have another 60% of untapped potential that you don't even realize. Um,
I
and he
think
told countless stories of like in races where he would feel, or even during training, he would feel like his body's just falling apart. He's like, every step is just incredibly painful. And then he would push through that wall and then do another 20 miles like he was perfectly fresh again.
yeah,
So I think a lot of it is just more mental than it is actual physical limitations.
yeah, it's like accessing the good stuff up here. Uh,
Mhm.
your whatever dopamine and stuff. I guess. Um, the interesting part though in those decisions is like at some point you're gonna have to pay a price for like cashing in all that energy. Um, because like, yeah, probably 8 times out of 10, it pays itself off and you get more reward than what you spent, but, like, at some point, you're gonna hit your max, and
Yeah.
making that decision to access that extra tank of gas, your last tank of gas, that's gonna buy you so you have to be kinda smart, like, in taking that risk, like, maybe in my case, like, I'll probably start doing races next year, and it's like, I'll do my best to make sure I save that extra tank for that race day or whatever, because
Hmm.
it's gonna suck when you
Yeah.
spend everything
Yeah.
you have. You're gonna be hurting. So,
Yeah. How
so
do you
I have a
think
question.
about, you're good.
Oh, I was gonna I have a question about your weight training. So, yeah.
Go for it.
Okay. So, what's your like philosophy on moving up in weight? How do you do it?
Ideally, like, it depends on the exercise because to make, so you want to strive for like progressive overload, which is either moving up in weight or adding additional reps to whatever like your current weight is that you're doing. Um, and it's different for everybody, but I try to, like, if I have a set workout plan on this exercise, like I'm going to do, 3 sets of 8. If I can do 3 sets of 8 at that exercise and feel like I could have done more, then the next week or the next time I do that workout, I'll move up, like, depending on the workout, either it could be 5 pounds, or if it's like, something that like a smaller muscle, then maybe like 2.5, like just whatever the next increment is. Um, and so, yeah, I try to ideally do it as often as you can, but there's so many variables that go into, like, a lot of the mainstream, like, weightlifting guys will tell you like, oh, you should move up like every single week. And I've found that that's just not that realistic. Like there's some exercises that haven't really moved up all that much over the course of like the past 6 months. Cause a lot of it, like also depends on your diet, your recovery, so many other variables. So I try not to put too much emphasis on like, okay, I need to move up by this certain time. Um, because you can even progressive overload by like doing the same workout, the same weight, but just either go a little bit slower. So there's more time under tension on the muscle. Um, there's so many other
Um,
ways to do it beyond just like moving up weight.
okay. Yeah, so can you explain a little bit more of that? What'd you call time under tension?
Time under tension. Yeah. So like you have whatever your normal speed is for doing a rep, or if it's bench press or whatever. Um, you could slow it down to increase the time under tension for that muscle. So say you're okay, instead of doing maybe your normal cadence is like 1 second down, 1 second up, you could be like, okay, I'm going to do 3 seconds down, 1 second up. Um, and that puts more like strain on the muscle over the course of that set. And so it does the same it does the same effect as it would of like doing extra reps or adding additional weight. It really
Gotcha.
just kind of depends on the situation. And like, okay, if today and two, day by day, it's like there's some days that I go in and like everything is normal circumstance, but I just don't feel as strong as I normally do. And so maybe I'll move down in weight or move down in reps. And then other days too, I'm like feeling really good. And so I'll jump like way up.
Yeah.
So a lot of it's just kind of, you got to figure out, you know, pay attention to what your body's telling you and like just take advantage of the strong days. And then on the days that you're not feeling that strong, it's not that big of a deal. Like you can get after it, the next week or whatever.
Yeah. I notice that with running a lot. I kind of like it, at least the way I handle it. So, generally I'll kind of come up with a game plan for the next day, what I want to do. Uh, but then oftentimes I'll show up to the run and be like, well, I feel fast today. So then I'll
Mhm.
push hard and shorten the distance, or it's like, well, today's kind of a slog. So I'll just take it easy and try and, just get his whatever, maybe lengthen the run a little bit. So I just kind of meet,
Yeah.
the needs of the day. But like I know a lot of runners, they'll kind of make like pretty advanced schedules, weeks out. They'll plan a couple weeks out ahead of time, and I'm sure they're flexible on it. But I would imagine you have to be. I certainly couldn't imagine just like sticking to your schedule every day. You're just because you just don't know how you're gonna feel showing
Yeah.
up.
Yeah. I think
Uh,
that it's also like a very short term mindset. Like I think if you, especially when you're training for something, like you have to think about it in the sense of like, okay, I've been training for, 8 weeks for this thing. Like maybe today I don't hit what I was going to, and like it's not that big of a deal. Like you shouldn't
yeah,
feel like you're screwing up your whole training plan.
yeah, yeah, for sure. I'll have to send you a link. I forget the guy's name. He heard him on Joe Rogan. He's a Russian weightlifting coach. Been in the game for a long time, and uh, he mentioned like he talked about progressive overloading, like you talked about, but he also mentioned something along the lines of like I would call it shock training. So you just stay at your base for a long time weightlifting, and then
Mhm.
just like all of a sudden you just like one day you just add like a shit ton of weight on. Um, Obviously not to a dangerous degree, but and it's just
Yeah.
kind of that like I guess that surprise, that shock of the moment that your muscles just like get the
Hmm.
adrenaline's going, whatnot, and your muscles do it. And then that's a good way to like train them to carry that weight.
Oh, that's interesting. I've heard of people talk about like shock the muscles or whatever, but I've always kind of thought that was maybe a myth. But yeah, you have to send me that so I can kind of look into that more because there might be some. I could see there could be maybe some sort of like science behind that.
Yeah, I think his argument was he he was maybe saying we underestimate the benefit of like repetitive, staying at at the same weight for a long time, but consistently doing the movement. Because there's something
Mhm.
about it, he was saying it just like ingrains that movement, that workout just like so far into your muscles that, the more you do it, the more it's just like a part of you. And then
Yeah.
that kind of just sets you up to be able to just rip that set or whatever. So
Mhm. Yeah. And two, a lot of it is like a lot of like if you're lifting heavier than you normally would, a lot of it isn't necessarily like your own muscle strength. It's just like your CNS isn't like prepared to push that amount that you need to. So
Hmm.
I could see like you may have the strength to do X amount of weight, but you whatever for whatever reason you feel like you can't do that. But if you like, I could see in his case where if you just like kind of force yourself to put up that extra weight that you normally wouldn't do, then maybe your CNS could like adapt to that, super
Yeah.
high stimulus, and then you're just kind of like used to that at that point.
Yeah. 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 I don't know. That sounds reasonable. You'll have to send it to you and you have to let me know if that's what
Mhm.
he was actually saying. Because he talked a lot about like avoiding plateaus and stuff, and something about like it's really easy to go up in weight really quickly, um, but long term gain just takes a lot of like kind of slow building, slow incremental
Yeah.
increases in weight. So
Yeah. How do you think about rest in the context of work instead of um, physical exercise? Like, because we both have non-traditional forms of work to where we could theoretically work as much as we want to. It's not like we have like, oh, we have to work 9 to 5 and then we're clocking out for the day. Like we could do 12-hour days if we want to. So how do you think about that in terms of like
uh,
burnout and, when do I like bunkering down versus like, okay, I need to like pump the brakes a little bit and take a break.
yeah, um, so I'm kind of like if I were left to my own devices, I would just be a psychopath, I think. Um, but like like for example, when I moved out to Montana, uh, I kind of grown up my whole life. Like I skied every now and then, but I just like loved skiing. And so when I finally moved out to Montana, I just like that's all I did. That's all I thought about. Just ski, 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 ski. Um, and I think I kind of just get that way with whatever I undertake. But
Mhm.
now that I have a fiance and a dog and some other priorities, I'm just kind of learning the balancing act, and so yeah, I just say I'm very very balanced, to the point where I don't just like one good day of rest a week, and even that day isn't really a rest day. Like it's more just a chill day where I intermittently do chores.
Mhm.
Um, so yeah, I wouldn't say I really like gas myself with work often, but not to say that I wouldn't if I got the choice or like the opportunity. Like I think like it'd be fun to do like a week of just like hammering stuff out, you know,
Yeah.
because I think it's just good to have that ability to do that. So it'd be kind of fun. I don't know
Yeah.
how or when I would do that, but maybe try it
Mhm.
out sometime.
Yeah. I think for me, because I have experienced burnout before, and like back when I was really heavy into my e-commerce business, I mean, I would work 10, 12 hours a day majority of the time. Like,
Hmm.
and to me, it didn't feel like work because I really enjoyed doing it. But I wouldn't say that's a very like balanced lifestyle by any means. But I think depending on what your goals are and what you want to accomplish, there's not anything wrong with that, or at least doing that for a period of time, especially when you're younger too and you don't have a whole lot of responsibilities.
Yeah.
Like that's the time to really to do it. And I mean, it was 10, 12 hours a day for a couple years straight. And towards the end of it, I did get burned out, but I still don't know if that was, I don't think it was burnout from the amount of work I was doing. I think I just lost interest in the company that I was working on. Um, I don't think and I could be really off on this, I'm not sure, but I think if you get burned out on something, it's not a nature of like you're just working too much. It's just you don't care enough about it. Because that interest will fade over time if it's not something that you like truly, truly want to do. Like that motivation will only last for so long.
Yeah.
Um, so that's
Well,
like hit a
it's
wall where I was like, I felt like I had to force myself to work. And at that point, it's like, okay, this is probably time for me to like push things up, move on to something else that I'm like way more interested in.
yeah, I think you might be onto something. Like, if you're spending that much time doing something, you're gonna get to know, you're gonna get really familiar with it. You're gonna know exactly what it means to you. So
Mm,
yeah, odds are you just kind of come to this conclusion that it's like, all right, this isn't the most important thing, or this isn't what I want to be pursuing.
yeah.
So no, that makes sense. I had the same. I'd say my biggest experience with burnout. I think I've had it probably like probably 3 times, just from the nature of my kind of just from my nature, like of finding something that I like a lot, and then just making that the only thing I care about. So, like growing up, it was golf. So, like 6th grade, I got really into golf and pretty much just played like every day straight till like sophomore year. And then, yeah, I just kind of hit that point where I was like, "What the hell does this matter?"
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
then happened to get in the Air Force. Like, got in the Air Force, really liked my job. It was really fun. The community, like the guys I worked with, and everything was great. But yeah, then you just spend all your time doing it, and then you're just like, "Well, it's just what," you know, not dumb, but yeah, you get over it, and that happened with skiing. So yeah, I get that. I get the feeling for sure. And I think that's why now, like, it's kinda cool we're talking about this. So I just hit the year mark on my Substack. Um,
Oh, nice.
yeah, like it. And so it's yeah, like there are some weeks where the articles are a little bit, they're not as clear to me in my head when I want to say, or when I want to, what evidence or what things I want to draw on to make my point. So I have to spend, you know, quite a bit of time working on it whenever. But then there are other weeks where it's just like sit down, 30 minutes later, boom, Substack's done.
Yeah.
Um, and so, yeah, I just kind of let it come to me. Whatever the week presents, it presents. And that's oftentimes those two things balance each other out. And then also, I think for like 3 weeks in the summer, I didn't post. I had trips going on and whatnot. And like, I think at the beginning of that time period, I was kind of like stressing to put something out, but I was like, odds are that you're going to rush it. It's not going to be that good. Then it's going to take away from your vacation. So then you're going to have neither a good Substack or a restful, immersive vacation. So
And
I made that decision. Like, no, I'll just enjoy the vacation. Like, I'm going to put out Substacks theoretically for the rest of my life. What the hell is 3 weeks? So, um,
yeah.
and I don't think that's a decision I would have made, 2 years ago. So,
And this kind of ties into one of the questions that I had. How do you go about balancing between like sacrificing for your future and taking advantage of being young? 'Cause I think a
mhm.
lot of people, I think us two are pretty different from the typical mindset of our age. Like I think a majority of people our age, they are still more focused on just enjoying being young and not really focusing much on the future, which I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that. Like everyone can do whatever, live how they want to live. But I think for us, we've been more focused on trying to sacrifice more while we're young. But I guess how do you go about trying to balance the two? Because I would say as of late, I've been more like I did a lot of sacrificing in my early 20s, I think, like college and or even high school too. And now I'm trying to like live a little more. But how do you kind of go between those two?
Yeah, I would say, so how our peers were heavy on the enjoy their youth, not sacrifice, camp. uh, pretty much just the complete opposite. I think I sacrificed too much,
Yeah.
and and just missed out on some things. I wouldn't say I guess if I had to pick one over the other, I don't know what I would pick. Uh, Definitely at this point, I would say I my path was better, but like, what if fucking die? Then you miss out on everything. So,
Yeah.
I'm definitely to a point now where it's, yeah, a lot more balanced. I mean, I like, God, this was so dumb, dude. So there I am. I'm like, what, 22, fresh off deployment. You know, everybody knows 2021 was a 2020, whatever, COVID. The stock market was banging. So I put my money
Yeah.
into Tesla, like that goes up a little bit. So god dang, 22, whole world, right in front of me. But all I could think about was just protecting the money. What do I need to be doing to be like turn this into a lifelong source of wealth? And
Mhm.
and then a year later, and it disappears. So looking back, it's like I should have, taken uh, trips, or I think we talked about this last time. Like, I look back, I wasn't like buying anybody extra beer or having people over for food, like cookouts or
Yeah.
whatever. I wasn't really putting it to good use. So
Yeah.
yeah, now definitely it's you gotta pay attention to what's coming tomorrow and what you can do to make that better for you. But also you gotta have some fun now and whatnot. So that's kind of where I'm at.
Yeah. I'm in a similar boat where I feel like I don't want to say I sacrifice too much because I don't regret any of the things that I sacrificed. Like I definitely compared to the people around us, my social life was a lot more limited than theirs. Like at that time I would have much rather stayed in and worked as opposed to like going out and spending a lot of money and drinking on the weekends and all of that. And it definitely paid off. So, like, I can't say that I regret it, but at the same time, like, there was a lot that I missed out on. And so, yeah, I think it really is just a matter of finding the right balance. But I would say I think there's a lot of value in, like, I think I would rather sacrifice some, not a overly sacrifice, but I'd rather sacrifice more when I'm younger. Um, like
Uh,
20s, maybe even early 30s to set myself up for doing literally whatever I want in my, mid to late 30s and so on.
yeah, I think that's a good call because likely like those experiences you're sacrificing when you're younger, uh, they're likely to be more shallow. Like, I didn't appreciate fully, when I was fresh out of high school or even in high school. Like, I didn't appreciate fully friendship or adventure or whatnot. And I don't think I withdrew as much meaning as I would now.
Yeah.
Uh, so I think that's fair to want to sacrifice those things because ultimately the ones you have later on are going to be more valuable.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a good point. And I don't think, I mean, you mentioned earlier, like, yeah, you could die at any moment. Like it would obviously suck to like sacrifice a lot when you're young and then not get a chance to fully live and then die at a younger age. But I feel like that's such a rare possibility that you really shouldn't keep that, in mind. But I think now I'm a lot more on the side of like, if I want to take a trip somewhere, I'm gonna do it because I think there's a lot of value too in like taking advantage of your youth in some extent. Like I'd rather go on, you know, go travel when I'm like in my 20s and even early 30s still, as opposed to like I don't want to start living life at 50. Like I want to
Yeah.
do as much as I can now. So it's hard to find that right balance. And I think I've done both extremes. And so now I'm trying to figure out like what's the right way to balance that. But I do
Yeah.
think a lot of people our age in particular they don't ever really learn the value of like delayed gratification. And I think that's like a super important skill to have.
Yeah, and I think, um, oftentimes not only do they not, um, like, make sacrifices for later, but uh, they do so while, like, not putting themselves in a position to, like, they'll take on debt, I guess, to live this extravagant, adventurous youth,
Mm,
by, like, going to expensive universities or whatnot, and, I think that's silly. Um, I do. You should either figure out a way to take these adventures, uh, w in a manner where you make money or come out even, but, like, the idea of, like, you know, going into debt to do these things, is just crazy.
yeah. Because you see so many people that are in their 40s, 50s, 60s, and like they still live somewhat paycheck to paycheck. Like,
Mhm.
or they still have tons of college debt that they're trying to pay off. And so I think there's a way you can go about doing both, like working hard when you're young and making sacrifices when necessary while also, taking advantage of being young. It just requires being like very mindful of the future, um,
Mhm.
which I think most people around our age, they would just rather not even think about that. They're just like, I'm just gonna do what I want to do now, and then I'll figure things out, afterwards. And I don't think that is not a very productive way of going about that.
No, no.
All right. Um, which one do you want to do next?
Um, you could do your number 1.
Okay. Yeah. Um, I was curious to get your thoughts on this. Like, when do you go to others for advice versus just trusting yourself and your own intuition, or just making a bet on yourself without the input of others?
Hmm. Um, I would say I definitely trust myself more than like, my nature is to trust myself more than to go to other people, for probably 2 reasons. Um, I'm pretty, like, introspective, reflective,
Mhm.
um, so I feel like whatever is going on in my head, whatever decision I'm facing, like, I understand my perspective the best, if that makes
Right.
sense. Uh, and then 2, I wanna stick to it because I feel like if it is wrong or if it is successful, m by doing the act of like, by being the sole part of that process, like, I think I'm gonna learn that lesson the most. Like, it's gonna get the most ingrained in me. It's like watching somebody drive versus driving yourself, you know? You can
Yeah.
watch somebody drive all day, but you're not really gonna get any better at it until you do it. So, I think
Yeah.
that's kinda my philosophy, but that's not to say, like, uh I don't value other opinions and, because that's not true at all. I mean, it's you only know so much, and the more the more kind of opinions and eyeballs you can get on things, the better for sure. Um, so I'm always willing to like listen or I try to be willing to listen to other people or seek advice. I'm definitely not against it, but I would say definitely I go to my fiance the most for just like that kind of counterbalance. Uh,
Mhm.
But then outside of that, I would really just say, like, you know, you and, like, my dad, I think, close family, but,
Mhm.
those would be the only people I'd be like, "Oh, wow, I need some advice, like, I'm gonna ask them." Any
Yeah.
other advice getting outside of that, it's probably just by, like, coincidence. Like I'm just talking to somebody and we have like this
Yeah.
mutual, kind of problem or
Yeah.
whatnot. So,
Yeah. There's this quote that I have saved I really like. It says like reject 99% of advice. People want to see you do well, but they don't want to see you do better than them. And I think that's something that I've put a lot of emphasis on over the past couple of years, like just trying to, like just trusting my own gut and intuition compared to trying to get advice from other people. Cause I think when you're at a crossroads or something, you're trying to make a decision, the natural reaction is to like get other people's input. And I think that could just, like you said earlier, like no one knows yourself obviously better than yourself. And so it's hard for someone to give advice while knowing all the context that you know. And two, and the quote that I mentioned, like people want to see you do well, but not better than them. I don't even mean that in the sense of like people are evil and like they don't want you to surpass them. I think a lot of it's subconscious. Like you wouldn't like, I think when with us, it wouldn't necessarily be the case, but maybe people that you're not as close with, like if you're asking them for business advice or something, they might be a little more insecure. And so they might not give you, without even realizing it, they might not give you the right advice because they don't want to see you feeling like way better than them. It would make them feel like they're not, doing enough with their life. Um, and so I really try to just, I would rather be in control of my own decisions and only have myself to blame. And so I'd rather just fully trust my gut and just, if I'm wrong, it's on me. If I'm right, it's on me. And then, figure it out from there. The only times that I'd really go to other people for advice or be willing to trust people for advice is like people that I fully trust or people that are where I'm trying to go. Like I'm not going to ask business advice from someone that doesn't have that successful of a business or no business at all. Cause how are they really going to help, Like if I, the
mhm.
only time I'm going to get business advice from people is if they are way ahead of where I'm at and I'm trying to get where they are. And I can trust them to give reliable advice. Uh,
Yeah. I
so
think
I
oftentimes, I think oftentimes too, like, even when I get advice from those I trust the most, um, there are often situations where I won't even, it's good advice, but I don't even like fully adopt it. It's more just like, I was seeing this much, I hear them out, and now I see this much,
yeah,
but I don't like discard that much that I already saw. I just kind of
yeah,
like morph the two. Um,
yeah,
yeah. Because I think if you just live off other people's advice, like you're not even you. You're not,
no.
you know, you're just, you're an avatar or something.
I mean, you talk to enough people, like all the advice is just going to cancel out. Like you're going
Yeah.
to get so many different opinions that it's just not even valuable at that point because you've heard everything. And so,
Yeah. Well, and you should question, like, I guess we're talking specifically about, like, I don't know. Like, I feel like you should, obviously, there are situations where you're in just, it's chaos and you're in a new territory and maybe you don't know shit about anything. And I'm not talking about that. I'm kind of talking about like, your business ventures, my Substack, just things we're like really familiar with.
mm,
Um, well, god dang it, now it's gone. That's frustrating.
that's the,
Okay, no, it's here. Like, I feel like you should have like a clear vision of, what you're wanting. And if you're having to rely on other people's advice because you don't have that clear vision, like you're probably in the wrong spot. Like you probably shouldn't be pursuing this thing, or it's not your time yet. Like step back,
yeah,
get find your footing a little bit more, and then proceed.
Yeah.
But like,
Yeah.
maybe I think it's easy to get excited about, like, on the internet, you'll come up on some opportunity, like whatever, just to make money. Maybe it's really easy to get sucked into that thing. And then you're just like following these kind of patterns laid out for you by other people. Um, and you're solely going off their thing like that. That seems wrong. You should
Yeah.
have a little bit more say in what you're doing.
Yeah. For sure. I think there's one thing of like, I think there's obviously value in like being able to learn from other people's experiences. But again, it just comes back to like, you should only take the advice from people that have been where you're trying to go, because otherwise they don't have the context or the experience to give you the proper advice. Like you're not going to get relationship advice from someone that doesn't have a good history of relationships, or you're not going to ask for business advice from someone that I'm not going to go to, like, I think like parents would be an example. Like that, if you're, whatever you're working on, parents naturally want to give advice because they care, obviously.
Yeah.
Um, but just because they're your parents doesn't mean that you should like listen to
Yeah.
everything, or no, you should listen, but I'm saying you shouldn't like automatically
Yeah.
take what
Yeah.
they're advising you, because like in the case of business, they ran a business before. And so, yeah, hear them out. But at the end of the day, it's better to just probably trust your own gut, figure things out based on all the context and knowledge that you have, as
Yeah.
opposed to just listening to someone that might have some like authority in your life.
Yeah. For sure. Yeah. So what, like, I feel like I need to figure out my understanding of advice versus like just talking something through with somebody. And because I think I've been coming at this conversation from the perspective of like just talking about a problem with somebody, but like advice. I almost like outside of my fiance, I like never want advice almost.
Yeah.
Now that I'm thinking about it, like I don't want it. I don't. Like,
No, I'm the
and
same
maybe
way.
this makes me really stubborn. I got it. Like, I'm not saying I'll be right. This is all making so much
Yeah.
more sense now. Yeah, like, I'm not saying I'll be right all the time, but like, yeah, no, shut up. I don't want it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. No, that's how I
that's
am.
funny. Yeah,
Because there's for sure a lot of value in just like talking things out with people. Because even just the act of like, maybe they aren't even like adding much to the conversation, but just the act of like talking through your own thoughts to somebody else, like that can help expand on the idea, give you more ideas, like broaden your vision on whatever that topic is. But yeah, I meant more in the form of like direct advice, like asking someone, okay, this is my situation. What should I do? Or
yeah,
what do you think I should do? Or what would you do in my position? Like, I'm very, very rarely in a situation where I would actually ask somebody that and hear them out. Because
hmm,
I'm something I've really been practicing a lot more recently is just because I get caught in the trap of overthinking things way too much. Now and it's still hard to do, but I'm trying to just trust my intuition as much as I can. Like, don't think about things much. Like, whatever my gut reaction is, just go with that always.
yeah,
And maybe I end up wrong, and I learned from that experience, but majority of the time, my gut has been right. And so
yeah. There, I
all
think
all
there's
the
probably, I think there's probably two reasons for that. Uh, One, it's probably some sort of like instinctual thing. Like,
Mhm.
humans, your ancestors they successfully navigated the world for like, what, like a million years, maybe more. So
Mhm.
obviously, and I don't think like a whole lot of like information gets passed down to us uh, through genetics. Like, like how, I don't know, like birds, like think of an animal that gets bored and then gets left alone, but then it's somehow able to survive because like all of its knowledge that it would learn from like
Right.
observing its mother, just somehow gets passed down to it through genetics. Like I don't think that's the case for us. Uh, in many kind of situations, but certainly something like that gets passed down to us, and I think that's like that gut reaction. Like that's what that is,
Yeah.
if that makes sense. And then also
Yeah.
like just from like my religious perspective, I think a lot of that's like just from God personally. Like that's where I put a lot of my because I'm maybe based on this conversation, it seems like I'm like not uncertain a lot. I'm uncertain all the time. But yeah, I leave it up a lot of it up to my gut just because it's like I think that's there's some sort of divine connection there. And like that's where I put my faith. But you know,
Yeah.
your secular view, you do the same thing. And so yeah, I think there's something to it for sure.
Yeah. Because I'm not really religious, but I also think there's some sort of like I don't even know how I would describe it or put it into words, but like I relate a lot to that second point you made of like some sort of like divine, influence on your decision making. I don't know what I attribute it to, but I think there's just something to be said for like I feel like I'm gonna end up where I need to go. And so it's
Yeah.
best to just make the decisions that like my gut is telling me to make and I'm gonna end up there?
Yeah. Weird concept, but for sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
There's something to it.
And me being not religious, I don't know if that's like an ego thing, like, oh, this is my destiny, like this is what I'm just meant to do. Maybe it is, maybe it
Yeah.
isn't. I don't know. But to me,
No,
that's like it's like a cool way of for me to go about decision making.
mm,
And it just allows me to like think less about my options and just go with whatever feels the most natural to me.
yeah. Yeah. Isn't that kind of weird that, I mean, I don't know if this is true for you, but like a life where one has a fate seems more exciting than one where one just has like, I don't know, can just
Yeah.
no determined path.
Yeah. 100%.
Yeah, that is weird. It's like,
And even,
eh, I don't know, it makes me feel like I'm in like some sort of, uh, God, what's the word? Like night tale or something. Like it's cool.
yeah. Yeah. No, like I will literally tell myself that because maybe it's just something that I'm making up in my head, but like I'd rather think that like there are certain things that are just meant for me in life as opposed to just be like I'm just aimlessly wandering and like, you know, whatever
Yeah.
happens, happens. Like, no, I truly do feel like, there are certain things in life that are just meant to happen to me and they will. And so I just need to trust my intuition, to allow me to get there.
Yep. Yeah. I'm in the same boat.
It's funny how we both have the same thing where we attribute it to two different things. Cause like, again, I'm not super religious, so I don't even know what I would attribute it to, but, um, that's just, it's something I've kind of always felt and I don't really have like a full explanation for.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, but that idea is just like so, I think it's just like so old. Like what's coming to mind is, did you ever see the movie, A Knight's Tale?
I might have not
Okay.
really coming to
It's
mind
good.
now.
You should check it out. But yeah, there's just like the idea that your destiny is determined by the stars and you can't change your stars and stuff like that. So, I mean, and obviously
Yeah.
that's not like a super historically accurate movie, but yeah, I would believe that um, that idea goes back a long way in human history. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, for sure. All right. I think we probably got time for one more. Um, we've got, okay. So podcasts versus reading. Um, which one do you prefer and like how do you, compare the two?
I like both a lot, but um, I think a lot of people may view them as sort of the same thing as accomplishing the same task, but I don't think that's true. Um, I hardly like ever remember podcasts. I don't remember what was said, really. I don't remember like who was on them other than just the fact that like I have kind of staple shows. Um, but they kind of act in the subconscious, like is how I would describe it. It like pod they sort of build up. I listen to probably however many podcasts I listen to now since I think junior year is when I started. And they play sort of this like inactive role in my personality, I would say. Um, where reading, like I remember uh, every book that I read, you know,
Mm.
uh, and I remember specifically how they each affected me. I think back to them a lot. And so they just get like imprinted in my brain in a much more obvious, accessible way where podcasts do not. Um, but that, it, but podcasts, I also use them for like two different purposes. Like books, I kind of want some sort of like profound experience where podcasts, I more listen to them just to like stay in tune with today's world. Uh, so like books, I'm kind of looking at life from like up here, and then maybe podcasts. It's just a way smaller view of things, but it's more grounding than books, I would say, if that
Mhm.
makes sense. So like, I listen to like Theo Von and Tucker Carlson, this week. We're not talking about anything crazy. It's
Yeah.
not uh, a podcast that's going to be remembered forever, but um, it's still just like incredibly beneficial and just keeping me like in the moment, in the time period. Because if you read, if you really get into like classic literature and stuff, you're just gonna fucking,
Yeah.
your mind's gonna go away into a different
Yeah.
land. So, yeah, that's kind of my view on it.
Mhm. I always I've never been that good about reading books, and only up until recently, like the past couple of months, that I've actually gotten back into it. And even still, it's still a struggle for me to read, even if I'm interested in the book. I don't know why. Uh, I'm just much more of like a visual person, and so I can sit down and I don't listen to podcasts either. I always watch them. I
Mm.
can I could watch a 3-hour podcast like it's nothing. If it's like one of the ones that I'm like primarily interested in. Uh, Whereas books, I don't know why it just feels like it feels like more work to me. And
Yeah,
so I've always definitely preferred podcasts, and I feel like I retain them really well too. I think I just like being able to watch something. Like I think maybe it's in part due to like I think my memory is like somewhat photographic, so I just do better by like having something to look at. Um, and also I can't like put on podcasts in the background while I'm like working or something. I can't do that. My brain does not work that way. Like if I'm watching a podcast, that's the only thing that I'm doing. Like I'm not like I may pause and like work on some other stuff, but I can't like just have it on in the background and listen to it while I'm like working or just like hanging out or whatever. That doesn't work for me. I just completely tune it out to whatever I'm like primarily focusing on. Um, so yeah, I always prefer video podcasts, and I'm trying to get back into books because I do enjoy reading. It just, like I said, it's a bit more work for me. I think it's just something you have to like get back into and like
it's
practice a little bit more.
yeah, I was gonna say it's a almost a skill, like, um,
Yeah.
that you just have to hone. Because I would say I've always enjoyed reading, but from like I didn't read much in high school. Picked it back up after high school, and that first like 2 years, it was hard to read more than like a chapter.
Yeah.
But yeah, then I just stuck with it and eventually could read more and more. So it's definitely that's yeah, something that needs to be practiced.
Yeah. And it's not even like an attention span thing for me because like I said, I can sit down and watch a 3-hour podcast easy.
Mhm.
And once I pick up the book, I can read until, I'm not like struggling after a chapter to keep going.
Mm.
Like if I'm interested in a book, I'm going to keep going. It's more of like, it never even really crosses my mind to be like, oh, I should read. Or if it does cross my mind, I'd be like, I'm just not really feeling it right now. And then so
Yeah.
like
We're
the book that I'm what?
literally the exact opposite. Because I always choose
Yeah.
to read, but even if I love the book, like, even after a chapter, I'll be like, "Should I put it down?" So that's
Yeah.
funny.
Yeah. Like that the book I'm reading right now, the Elon Musk biography, like when I first got that, I was like going through it. Basically, like every night before bed, I would read it, and then like a couple days off, and I just like got out of the habit of doing it, and I haven't read it in probably a week and a half, 2 weeks now. And I enjoy it. Like every time I do pick it up, I enjoy it. But like I said, reading just feels like more work to me. Um, I don't like audiobooks for the sake of like I don't want to just listen. Like I want to be able to like look at something. And so
Yeah.
if someone can make like video versions of books, I mean that's basically a movie, but like if I could just have that for every book, then I would love it. But I think I just need to like practice it a little bit more and get used to the act of like reading.
Yeah. Yeah. Speaking of movies, I mean, just a extra question, like, I think there's this I feel like movies are looked down upon, like, they can't affect you as much of as a book, or they're not as profound as books, but I think it just depends on what movie you're watching. Like, you watch like, I don't know what movies you would consider, like, profound, but maybe one we could both agree on is, like, Interstellar.
And
Watch Interstellar, that's gotta be, like, as productive as reading a book.
yeah, I don't, I wouldn't agree with that at all. Or the people that say that, like I find movies to be way more profound than books. Um,
Hmm.
Again, just because I like the visual stuff way more. And two, with movies, there's music that comes with it. There's so many different visuals that come with it, different characters that you can like literally see. Whereas with a book, you're kind of doing that all in your head. Um, so I find way more value in, at least me personally, the movies. And
Yeah.
I feel like a lot of people that say like, oh, the books are better, like they just want to seem cool because they read books. Like, all right,
No,
relax.
no, that easy, that's me, and they they just are better, I swear, every time.
Some might be because there's probably way more detail in the books that just can't be conveyed in like a 2 to 3 hour movie. Like I get that.
Eh, Harry Potter's like that, like, the movies are great, but there is just, like, so much that's missed from the story, but, like, Maze Runner, the books are better simply just because the movie's shit, like,
And
so, uh, I'm trying to think, I don't know. I don't know if there's a single case where you're right, where the books
cool.
or where the movies are better.
That might be the case. I don't read a lot of books, but when people say that, I'm just like, all right, relax, dude. But
Yeah.
yeah, that makes sense. All right. Um, any other topics you want to go over?
No, no, I think we hit them all.
All right, cool. We'll wrap up there then. I'm really liking this new format a lot more than just like the topical stuff. And so might end up sticking with this for a little bit or for a while and then just kind of sprinkle in some topical stuff whenever we feel like it. But yeah, we'll wrap it up there and then be back with another episode next week.